I welcome you to my home. Do come in, have a seat. I have something here to relax you. I think you'll find it quite a treat. If you find me sounding insane, it's just the absence of talking. It's just the
Welcome back again to what I think will be another fun chat. This one is about the legacy auto manufacturers and something that I've been thinking about for quite some time now, and some of the conclusions that I've come to over the last 8 months or so about all of this. And the legacy automobile manufacturers, they're in trouble. They're in big trouble. And they're in trouble because they no longer understand the market that's coming out. They think that people are buying cars and that they're buying Teslas because they want electric cars as opposed to gasoline cars. And what I think that they're missing is what lessons they applied to the existing market 100 years ago. And that is that you have to look very closely at the problem that you're actually trying to solve, and I don't think that they are. Let's go ahead and examine why that is. So back as the Industrial Revolution really started to get going, you see things like this. This is a 20-mule team hauling 10 tons of borax for 40 or 50 miles to get to the nearest rail spur. All right. Now, that was just how it was done in heavy industry, and it did not take very long before they went to this. And this is a steam tractor that did the exact same job. Interestingly enough, this steam tractor was not in use for very long because they wound up moving to other heavy vehicles that were gasoline powered. Well, this rapid movement all really kind of dates back to the fact that these early automotive pioneers understood their market. They understood what it was they were trying to achieve. And what they were trying to achieve was to go from this, which is a covered wagon group going across country, to something that would be either a option to rail or something that could at least be applied locally. And so here we have a horse-drawn hansom, and then that obviously gave rise to the idea that there were alternatives to personal mobility. Now, back to that wagon train for a moment. Imagine the support that is required to do that. The cartwrights, the wheelwrights, the farriers, the blacksmiths that have to accompany you. Aside from, again, we're not going to go ahead and cover all of the other logistical items just to keep people alive, food and whatnot. I suppose that while you're doing that, the horses can graze, so that's one of the main benefits that you had. And so again, early on, we look at this difference between a rural type of a situation and an urban or a suburban situation. In rural areas, your entire mobility is, again, reliant on horsemanship. You have horses, you have a carriage, and that's how you get around in your local area. Either that or you walk. Now, getting goods to market, same thing. You have horse-drawn carts to bring your goods to market. And it's a little different if you're in the city, going back to this idea of the hansom here. And in the city, you can call a cab that then comes from a stable, right? But your transportation, if you're not walking, depends on either yours or someone else's ability at animal husbandry. Now, in a farm type of a situation, horses are pretty hardy. They are a lot easier to care for in many ways than cattle are. So there's a benefit there. And it's something that just happens natively, that you have, if you're already cattle farming or if you're already farming, then you're already going to be able to have an environment that the horses will be able to exist in. So that's the market for the automobile. How do we supply convenience to both the urban and the suburban areas, as well as those people in rural areas, and get them a mechanical replacement for what it is that they're trying to do, in this case, personal mobility? And so that was helped along by the fact that there was an oil boom, and they were using obviously heavy oils not only for lubricants but also fuel oils and that type of a thing. And these oil refineries were burning off the lighter product that they get as part of refining the heavier oils. And finally you get to this lightest of product, benzene, and they're just burning it right off of the top, along with some of the gases that accumulate from the mining that it's just too problematic to collect. Well, we'd already been through the steam engine development, and so then using that same technology, then they were able to then adapt gasoline engines that basically burnt this waste product. And so then that brought a very energy dense mixture, energy dense fuel to the people for very cheap. The very first automobiles, most of them were electric. The most successful ones, the ones that were being mass produced, they were electric. Now obviously electric powered vehicles, that because of the battery, they really were in their infancy, and so their range was relatively limited. And as soon as gasoline came along as an alternative fuel for running the vehicle, it was so much cheaper and so much more energy dense that the game was on. There you go. Now you have a vehicle that will replace a biological complexity with a mechanical complexity. Basically, you have 2 or 3 horses hooked up to a carriage in your garage that you don't have to feed if you don't use the carriage. And so the convenience was incredible. And so then very rapidly, we went from things like this to this to this. Industry went from this to this very quickly. And so the market for what it was that these automotive providers were filling was very obvious. It was a split between personal mobility and industry. How do you haul your goods? All of that was very obvious. Well, now here we are 100 years on, and I cut the legacy automobile manufacturers a great deal of slack for not seeing this. And the reason being, obviously, that they've been ensconced in this industry for 100 years, and they have blinders on now, and they're only able to see the industry that they helped create. This symbiotic relationship between the automobile industry and oil. Get to that maybe a little more shortly, how difficult that is now to separate out. But also that you have this mechanically complex device to support. And over time, the industry was no longer so much focused on the fact that you could create these machines to do this or that. It was focused on the fact that these machines break down. And now you can support parts, you can support service centers, and all that. And if you make something too good, that's too well engineered, you are going to have to try and make some changes along the way. Oh, we've improved it in this way or that way. We've put more cylinders, we've changed our cylinder blocks, and claim all of this improvement, when what you're really doing is you're changing up which parts that you're delivering. And so then you're refreshing your models. And as they started to do this, they understood, wow, okay, there's a big business in this. And we can share from licensing dealerships, and then what we think of now as the modern automotive industry was born. Whew. Well, you can see where this is all going. Tesla comes along and changes the entire conversation. Now, no longer are we talking about a mechanical complexity. Now we're talking about replacing that mechanical complexity with a technological complexity. Now, here's where the automobile industry really missed what Tesla was doing back in 2012 when they were really starting to build momentum for all of this. And that is that Tesla isn't a car company. They're actually trying to completely dismantle everything that these legacy automobile manufacturers think that they are. They think that they're supplying you with a car, but Tesla understands that what they're supplying you with is a commodity. It is a way to bring your personal energy sovereignty, to get kind of back to our original theme of this page, this channel, and that is that originally, remember, you could feed your horses on your farm, and you had all of the resources available to you, or most of them, to be able to bring your goods to market or to travel locally. Okay? Now, we were willing to trade that biological demand for a mechanical demand because of all of the advances, all of the advantages that this gave us. And so I'm not trying to argue there that they didn't have a market, and they didn't know their market then. They certainly did. But no one at that time would have ever thought that you could drive across the nation on sunlight, that you could do almost all of your local driving on sunlight that was collected from your house in batteries that this provider gave you. So when you look at a Tesla vehicle, you're not looking at just the car, at least I'm not. I'm looking at the entire package. I'm looking at the fact that Tesla is now involved in not only the batteries that will power the car, but the batteries that will power the house. And that you're then able to take solar energy from your roof, store it in your house, and then put it into your car. And that is huge. That's huge. And that is not an automobile. Tesla is not selling you a car. The only legacy automobile manufacturer that I can think of right now that understands this was Mercedes. They actually were trying to have a home-based battery product as well. I think that their close relationship with Tesla allowed them to maybe see that sooner, and there were some people there that had some clarity that had figured this out. But to this date, battery technology and automobile manufacturers, very separate still. The light bulb has not gone on yet. And the existing automobile manufacturers have a terrible problem, and that is that they have invested themselves into the idea that they are going to be able to continue their mechanical model. When you look at a Tesla, and any electric car really, the motivation for the car to move it forward, there's 3 moving parts. Maybe as high as 6 or 7 if you want to start including the various bearings and whatnot, the gears that you have supported for the reduction gear, that kind of a thing. But there just isn't this mechanical complexity. So everybody at a legacy automobile manufacturer who's building an engine or a transmission, they can go home now. They can go home now. This is a completely different game. And so you then have to figure out how you're going to downsize those elements that you are no longer going to use and retrain a large portion of your workforce, but understand that your entire market is changed. People are now looking for how long-lived the cars will be. They're starting to see through all of this that they've been fed from the automobile manufacturers over the years that have tried to maintain this mechanical model. And we still see this dragging of their feet, the digging of the heels in from companies like Toyota that want to insist that you get yourself a hydrogen car. Why would they want to do that? Well, it maintains this mechanical complexity. It maintains a dependence on the automobile manufacturer because so far, these things, they've been able to reduce the amount of platinum that this hydrogen power cell needs to convert the hydrogen to electricity. They've been able to reduce the amount of platinum that it needs, but they haven't been able to eliminate it. And I'll do a separate video on this where I examine how completely unfeasible it is to try and put even that small amount of platinum in even just 1 million vehicles. There isn't enough platinum on the planet to supply even 2 million vehicles. So where I'm going with that is that the reason that they're driving hydrogen, even though they know that it won't work, is this last gasp that maybe something will happen that we will wind up being able to convince them to hold on to that mechanical complexity. So then we can still control the supply lines to get the hydrogen, to create the hydrogen, and then to get it to hydrogen filling stations. And so then we'll be able to maintain our relationships with these large providers, Shell, Chevron, all the Standard Oil, all the major players, BP, and in some way salvage this industry from what's happening to it. And they won't. And they won't. Because when you buy a Tesla vehicle and maybe batteries or solar for your house, you're buying the car, you're buying the oil refinery, you're making yourself self-sufficient. You just don't need all of this support structure. In a very real way, you're back to a similar situation that they were with the farm and having your own horses. So I hope you found that interesting. It's been something, again, that I've been thinking about for a while. It's been percolating to the surface as I'm seeing other true competitors to Tesla, the ones that are coming up that are not invested in these legacy ideas. Volkswagen Group is also now starting to be able to turn, but these giant companies, they are not nimble. They are not nimble. And companies like Ford and GM, where they have these huge investments in these plants that are making drivetrain components and engine components that are just, they're not useful. They're not useful, and they have to basically write off and alter all of this because it's just gone. It's parts that these electric vehicles simply don't have. So, as always, thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this interesting, and the best of luck with all of your own systems, and we will see you again soon.